I've just finished reading this book, Poor Economics, by Abhijit V. Banerjee and Esther Duflo, D-U-F-L-O. Fascinating book. This is the second time I've read this, and on the front of it, it says, or on the back of it, it's been years since I read a book that has taught me so much, and that's by the co-author of Freakonomics, very famous book as well. The book is essentially about ending poverty, I guess. Now that sounds very leftist, and I'm sure if you're a conservative or right-wing listener, you've just turned your ears off. You can't end poverty. It's the fault of the poor. They're poor because they're stupid. They're poor because they have no discipline. They're poor because they're lazy, and all of those. This book doesn't necessarily outright disagree with any of those, but what it does is it challenges those assumptions essentially by gathering data, the old empirical method. Gather data, question the assumptions, keep asking questions until you get to a result which allows you to draw on a variable which, when manipulated, leads to the desired outcome. Very, very interesting. It talks about things like, why do the very, very poor take loans at ridiculous interest rates, 4% a day? How can you stop politicians from stealing all the aid money? And it can be done. Why do certain policies which are really, 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 really well intentioned, like providing healthcare to poor villages in India, why are they a waste of time? And how can you challenge that? What these people did, what these authors did, is they went and they spoke to the poor people, and they spent decades doing it. And there's some really, really fascinating finds in this. And if you've ever had economic change, you've been doing really well, and then you've been poor, and then you've made a lot of money and lost any kind of fluctuation like that, a lot of this book will, I guess, make you smile and make you nod your head and think, yeah, that's definitely true. What prevents people from taking advantage of low-hanging fruit, the authors call it? For example, in India, a lot of the very poor will spend a lot of money on items which aren't necessary. Money like items like, I don't know, sugary tea, cigarettes, alcohol, when by just avoiding them for a little bit of time, with a little bit of discipline, they could massively improve their situation. Fruit sellers, for example, in developing countries, they'll borrow money at a ridiculous rate, 4% a day, something like this, just to buy their stock, then sell it, then pay back the moneylender. The reason, what they could do is they could borrow less, and or with the money they've borrowed, not buy so much, so many of the items like alcohol, etc. And then within something like, in some cases, 2 or 3 weeks, they won't need to borrow money anymore. But it's the psychology behind it. They don't think they'll ever be in a position. It's like learned helplessness. If you look up the learned helplessness experiment with dogs, and people suffer from it too. So it's a sort of depression, I guess. They don't think what they really want is attainable. So they may as well just enjoy life right now, have a bit of tea, have a bit of alcohol. It's psychologically, economically, and from a behavioral science point of view, fascinating book. I've given you a lot of the concepts. Is it an easy read? Yeah, I found it pretty easy. It's not as easy as reading a comic book or something, but then you're going to learn a lot from this book. People who would do well by reading this book, politicians. Yeah. Apparently, you can use the press in countries like Uganda. By using the press to hold politicians to account, corruption is actually reduced quite effectively. How would you do that in the UK when, if you've been following the election, maybe you'll agree with me, the press is it's the biggest bullshit factory in the world. It's just ridiculous. But even in a country like Uganda, the press is more reliable than it is in the UK. Very interesting book. I've gone on for quite a while now. I'll read you a bit of the blurb. Why would a man in Morocco who doesn't have enough to eat buy a television? Why do the poorest people in India spend 7% of their food budget on sugar? Does having lots of children actually make you poorer? Very poor people in many countries have a lot of children. There's an example in here, because they hope one of them will do well and be able to take care of them. They can't save for a pension or for investments. They live hand to mouth. So by having children and maybe hoping one of them is smart enough to send to school, maybe that child will turn out good and take care of you. The eye-opening book overturns the myths about what it is like to live on very little. That's defined in this book as less than 99 cents a day. revealing the unexpected decision that millions of people make every day, looking at some of the most paradoxical aspects of life below the poverty line, why the poor need to borrow in order to save, why incentives that seem effective to us may not be for them, and why, despite being more risk-taking than high financiers, they start businesses but rarely grow them. Excellent book. Read it if you don't mind a fairly heavy read. You'll learn a lot. Read it if you're a bloody politician with all your stupid sweeping generalizations that never work. Use your head for once. Stop just trying to win votes. Okay, I should stop now, but 8 out of 10, this book, very enjoyable. Hope you enjoyed the review.